Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k Necrons. We've got another unit review for you today, and this time we're going to be looking at one of the infantry options, which is the Necron Deathmarks. So we're going to get into that datasheet and give our Planet 40k rating at the end of this video. So let's get straight into the rear side, and we've got the points to begin. 65 points for 5, so that's 130 points for 10. That's virtually the exact same points cost as it was in 9th edition, so no real change there whatsoever. Now you're only taking 5 or 10, you're not taking nothing in between. And every model is equipped with a Synaptic Disintegrator and a close combat weapon. Other than being an infantry, there's nothing else of note on the rear side, so we're going to flip the card over and look at the statistics to begin. So the movement is 5 inches, toughness 5, 3+ armor save, 1 wound. All of that is as it used to be. The leadership is 7+, and OC is 1, object control 1. So not really holding much in terms of OC, but I mean you can't expect too much. They're virtually an elite. I know we don't have those kind of roles anymore, but they are basically like the elites from 9th edition. So as for the range attack, which is kind of the main deal about the Deathmarks, the Synaptic Disintegrators there, snipers if you like, they've got the heavy as well as the precision keywords. So heavy is a +1 to hit if they stay stationary, and precision means you can target characters that are inside bodyguard units, attached units. So it's a 36-inch range weapon with 1 shot per model. You're hitting on a 3+, not a 2+ like we used to. However, we do have heavy. It used to be heavy, but it used to mean something different. Now heavy is, like we mentioned, a +1 to the hit roll if they stay still. Strength is 5, -2 AP, and the damage has gone up to damage 2, which is quite nice. I think that's gone under the radar slightly. It used to be just damage 1. It used to take quite a long time to get those characters out of the way. Damage 2 definitely speeds things up. Now the close combat side of this data card, we've got 2 attacks with these guys instead of 1. I mean, they shouldn't really be in combat anyway, but if you do find yourself caught in engagement range, 2 attacks per model, weapon skill 3+, strength 4, no AP, 1 damage. So it's basically improvised weaponry at that point. It's not the best, but you've got some sort of defense there. Ability wise, we've got Deep Strike. They had Deep Strike before, they've still got Deep Strike. Gives them a different utility if you wanted to use them for secondaries. We'll talk about that later in this video with the battlefield role. They've got reanimation protocols, which is quite nice because they're only 1 wound models, so therefore you could be potentially bringing 3 back with reanimation protocols, or even more so with the reanimator and stuff like that. And their ability, which is unique to the Deathmarks, is Hyperspace Hunters. So once per turn in the reinforcement step of your opponent's movement phase, when an enemy unit is set up on the battlefield from reserves within 18 inches of this unit can shoot as if it was our shooting phase, but we must only target the unit that's effectively coming in. So the way I see that is it's basically free Overwatch, except it's not actually Overwatch, and you're not actually needing 6s to hit. You're needing just standard 3s to hit, or 2s to hit in fact, because you won't have moved. Now it's kind of the same as our previous, well, we had a stratagem. It wasn't an ability, we had a stratagem in 9th edition called Erethic Interception. It's virtually the same thing, except you're not paying a command point, but we also lost the deep strike part. We used to be able to deep strike in. Now we're not doing that. But yeah, getting a free shot is reasonably good. Now, in terms of the synergy from the index, we've got Protocol Conquering Tyrant to be able to re-roll our wound rolls. Especially useful if we're going up against those characters with the precision shots. We can only use this at half range. Now we can do it at full range if we are being led, but we will need the Sovereign Coronal to do so. You're not likely going to be using them on Deathmarks, especially if they're coming in from Deep Strike. So realistically you're going to be doing it at half range, and the range of this weapon is 36 inches. So 18 inches is the half range, which is in fact going to line up nicely with the Hyperspace Hunters ability that they have. Another option here is the Protocol of Vengeful Stars. If we do lose a model in our opponent's shooting phase, we get to shoot as if it was our shooting phase. So that can get a kind of good, because we can shoot in your opponent's movement phase, we could shoot in our opponent's shooting phase, and we've not even spoken about Overwatch yet. I mean, in terms of Overwatch, you could shoot in your opponent's charge phase. So they're actually shooting in quite a lot of different phases that aren't even in your turn, which is kind of cool. Protocol of Undying Legions is another Necrons one. If we lost a model in the unit from the shooting phase or any of the fight phases, we can basically use reanimation protocols for D3. Not too bad. And we've already mentioned the Sovereign Coronal Aura. If we are being led, then we're going to put a little bit of a boost on all those stratagems that we just mentioned, and we're also going to get a +1 to our hit roll from Command Protocols, so we'll be hitting on 2s, even if we move the weapons and even if we move the unit. So unit synergy, there's only really one here of note, and it's the Silent King with his Pharaoh of Stars Aura. One of his Triarch abilities, you get to reroll hit rolls and wound rolls of a 1 or with units within 6 inches of this unit. So if you're hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, and you're wounded on maybe 3s or 4s, rerolling 1s, you're going to get a little bit more damage off, especially against those characters. Right, let's talk about the battlefield role for the Deathmarks. What are we doing with our Deathmarks? I mean, I mentioned earlier on, they've got quite a bit of utility. You don't have to just sit them at the back and be shooting off, going after characters, although you can do that. That's their main use, I suppose. But they've also got the added use of being able to deep strike and potentially do it in the distant quarters of the game, on the battlefield, and you could be doing secondary objectives with them. I mean, 65 points for 5 is fairly cheap, and that's with deep strike as well, don't forget. And some of the secondary missions that we could be scoring with these kind of guys, well, assassination of course because of the precision ability, engaging all fronts because of the deep strike. In fact, all the rest of them relate to deep strike. We've got engaging all fronts, deploy teleport homers with the little action, behind enemy lines, cleanse. You can get into the no man's land objective and do that little action on the objective or one of them. Secure no man's land and extend battle lines, again jumping onto an objective in the no man's land area. So that's what you're going to be doing with them. What about the pros and cons for taking them? Well, first of all, pros of taking them: precision shots. That's kind of obvious. They're going to be shooting at characters. Not many units in our index have precision ability. I'm thinking now, off the top of my head, you've got the Hexmark Destroyer, the Catan Shot of the Deceiver. Of course, you could use the Epic Challenge stratagem in melee, but realistically, what's going to be doing that? I mean, the Nightbringer or any of the Catans, really, they could do that. Characters that aren't the Catans aren't really that choppy. Maybe the Scorpic Lord, maybe the Locust Lord. They're not super choppy. Overlord maybe, but it's been nerfed recently, so yeah, there's not many things that are going to have precision, so the Deathmarks are good for that. They've got Deep Strike. Again, you're competing there with other units. You're competing with Triarch Praetorians, so Deathmarks, I'd definitely pick them over Triarch Praetorians. They've both got Deep Strike. There's not loads of Deep Strike in the index. Hyperspace Hunters, the ability where they can shoot in your opponent's movement phase, reinforcement step. That's cool. They're fairly cheap, 13 points per model, we kind of mentioned that. 65 points for 5 is really cheap. It's really cheap, especially for what they can do. You could take, potentially you could take 30 of these guys, 3 lots of 10, and you could be doing all sorts of stuff. You could be doing all sorts of stuff. And yeah, that's the last point. In fact, they've got multiple uses. As for the cons, they're only 1 wound each, so not quite like Lich Guard, for example, who have got 2 wounds each. Objects control is quite low, it's only 1. I mean, we can't expect too much more from them, to be honest with you, but if you needed them to get the distant objectives, they're not really going to do that, and they're not going to be charging into those objectives because they don't really offer anything in melee. They've got no natural leader. You're going to have to use a Sovereign Coronal to get the leader buffs on them for command protocols, and they're competing with other units. Now, we mentioned Triarch Praetorians earlier in the pro section. That's probably a good example for them to compare with, but what about Ophidian Destroyers potentially? I mean, that they are, yes, they are more expensive, but they can keep deep striking in every turn, so I think they're probably better, but they're not really shooty, are they, Ophidians? They're more melee, but I wouldn't even get them into melee anyway. I'd rather just keep popping them out. So they're competing with other units. So let's get on to our Planet 40k rating for the Deathmarks, I guess. Well, for me, they're a good unit. They're a good unit. Was I slightly harsh in the big tier list? Probably. I was quite harsh with a lot of units because there were so many good units that were ahead of a lot of things. So I think I was overly harsh on quite a few of them. Would I take them in every list? No, I wouldn't take them in every list because I've got other options to do the secondary role that they do with the secondary missions. Again, Ophidian Destroyers, Hexmark Destroyers, you've got Tomb Blades that are quick. So you've got other options that can do stuff, so they're not an auto-include. Could I be using them for precision? Yes. I mean, the Assassination secondary, if you're choosing fixed and you're playing fixed, then yeah, you would be, but you're not really playing fixed. So therefore you're not really going to have you're only going to have assassination for one card in the game, and that's if it even comes up. So they're only really good for one card. So that's why for me they're not an auto include, but they are still good. So I'm going to be going with a Planet 40k rating of 3.5 out of 5. So guys, that is the end of the video today. Make sure you are dropping a subscription on your exits. Thank you all for watching. See you in the next one.